Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of If You Know Your History with me, Johnny Owen, and my dear, dear friend...
Mark Webster alongside you, but I'm drawn. I'm drawn to your torso, John. Not for the first time, but in this particular instance, what's going on?
What's the T-shirt up on today? It's nothing to do with the subject that we're doing today, funnily enough.
Is it something to do with you, though, judging by the livery?
It is. It is some of Wales's most famous tops.
Oh, that's neat.
Folded as if they are in a changing room ready to be donned by some of the greats. So, like, you got greats some eras here. You got, obviously, Ian Rush there. Mark Hughes would be there. Terry Orth would be there. The plain red would be John Charles.
The Yorith I recognise,
yes. The Yorith. It's the famous one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's the away kit there. So, yeah, I whacked that on this morning.
And if you were to unfold just one of those, which one would it be?
Well, it's a tough one now because I don't know if the 2016 one, which would be a favourite of mine, would be in there.
Well, that's because you've got an emotional connection, isn't it?
Absolutely. But if I would, gun to my head time, if I had to pick one, I would say the 1958 World Cup top is a fine top. It's got a big, thick, white thing. I've got one. Have you seen it? I've got the retro one.
That's right.
A big sort of cotton badge, and it was worn by John Charles and Ivor Orchard and Cliff Jones. That'll do me.
A serious V on that shirt.
A proper V.
And commendable it is too. But... okay, have we got Wales out the way?
But we haven't mentioned Merthyr Tydfil yet.
Listen, time is on our
Time's
side.
on our side, or West Ham. Anyway, we're talking about a Leviathan, a Goliath of the game. Retired, I think it's 2013, so enough distance now to sort of, me and Mark had a chat about this, to look back and say, possibly the greatest domestic manager ever, certainly in the English and British sense. There's a good argument to say somebody else called Bob Paisley running very close, which we will do an episode on. But we thought it was about time to talk about the great Sir Alexander Chapman Ferguson.
Great name. A man who, even to this day, this is the thing about him. It's not so much that he looms in spirit across Old Trafford. He's physically still there.
Yes, he is.
This is a man who still gets about. Obviously, he's had recent personal tragedy in his own family, but there's so much about this fella. He's got so much vigour, hasn't he? Well, that he won't go. He doesn't want to go away.
He doesn't. And something came up the other day that I thought was very interesting for him, and an extraordinary life lived. There was some footage of him going back to Ibrox and sort of young fans and kids all cheering him, and he's smiling, and he's kind of gone home. Apparently he's got a place back up there. He goes to watch Rangers, who are his beloved childhood team, because as we'll talk about, he grew up in the Govan shipyards. He went to work there. He sort of played football on the streets. But there's a nice sort of synergy about Fergie's life where he's one of those few people. He went out on his own terms, winning a title.
Yep. And
since then, he's sort of there's those great stories. He turned up in the Oscars. He's gone to watch. He's gone to watch great sporting events. He loves his wine. You know, he's an expert on John F. Kennedy apparently. So he's done this thing where
you'll never not see him at the old races.
Absolutely, and also I just thought, what a lovely image that he's gone back to his childhood team.
Yes.
With a smile on his face, and he's almost got that thing where you just go, "That's a great life, well lived, isn't it?"
And there's something about him, I guess, now that the yoke is off, there's almost childlike in his pleasure.
Yeah.
His face looks extraordinarily young, and there's that twinkle in his eye like a kid. And not the, and I quote, and this will come in later, not the frightening bastard that Bobby McCulley at East Stirlingshire encountered when Fergie took his first job on. But but that's quite a few, or his managing job. But that's a few years up the line from where we're going to start.
Yeah, well, we should start with that. I mean, I just want to kick this off by saying there's a brilliant thing I read and one that I listened to where he talks about in the final years of his management where he said, I was really lonely in the afternoons, because everything was done. And he said, I used to go walking from office to office to look to people to talk to.
Wow.
And he said, I went to one of my secretaries. He said, I just used to say to her, anything I need to do? And she was like, no, boss, everything's done. It's all sorted, you know. And he said, he read this famous quote by Sean Fallon, who, of course, was Jock Stein's famous assistant. And he went, by the end, we were quite lonely. And I thought it was quite interesting that he reflected that. And this was a pivotal moment for him to say, I'm ready to retire now because I want to do things in the afternoon.
Right.
And I come back to that thing we always talk about where footballers needed to discover golf to keep them out of the betting shops and the pubs, because a footballer's life is you train in the morning a few times a week, you play on a Saturday, but what do you do with the rest of your time? And I thought, God, even Fergie, the greatest manager of our era, possibly ever, at the biggest club arguably in the world with Real Madrid, Manchester United up there, in the afternoons, what does he do with himself?
Well, I'm glad you made that. That's that great quote, isn't it? Quote is golf is a great afternoon in the pub ruined. I may have paraphrased.
Yeah. But it saved a lot of footballers, they say that,
It's
don't
so true. No, and also it's kind of instinctive for them because they're still doing something competitive
Yes.
and vaguely athletic. I
Yes.
say vaguely, probably a bit harsh as well there. He was a Govanathan rather than a live. Anyway, yeah.
He was from Govan. He was born in December 1941, height of the Second World War. Obviously, we all know the story. We all grew up with Britain very much on the back foot. He was born in Clydeside, a place called Govan in Clydeside, part of Greater Glasgow, you'd call it, an area that had grown up a century before, especially in the Industrial Revolution, a place where there were shipyards, shipbuilding was their expertise, and the coalfields around it. So you had these people that sort of came down from the Highlands, especially, brought with them a very strong brand of Scottish Protestantism into
Yes.
Glasgow, and of course the Irish famine. Then, of course, in the mid 19th century, brought a lot of Irish immigrants, and there was this sort of city grew up which was very sectarian, very divided,
Totally.
but very tough. And Fergie was sort of born into that. He was very much a product of his environment. He even had a poster behind him in the office in Man United. From Govan. From Govan.
Okay.
And he had it above his seat behind him, so the people knew where he was from and where he came from. In this very area, Mark, we got to talk about Govan, what he was born into. I mean, it was really, it was called Red Clydeside. So weirdly, along with sort of South Wales, was seen as very much the sort of area of sort of the Mardy Pit in South Wales' nickname was Little Moscow because it had communist councillors and
Yes.
people trying to be communist MPs. Red Clydeside, very similar. Other areas had it. Liverpool, not so much Newcastle, but Glasgow was seen as very much the
This
home
is the docks,
of the
isn't it?
absolutely.
Driven by the
Left-wing
dock workers.
politics.
Yes.
And out of necessity, you're talking about the rent strikes of the First World War was in this area. Govan was in the centre of it, where, you had people saying that no housing was built in Glasgow, yet the population was exploding because the work was there. And these people, these landlords would charge the earth for almost, we talk about poverty in the modern sense, and but poverty then is a very different thing. You're talking what we would call third world poverty.
Yes.
People sort of like dying very young, disease, so Mary Barber famously was, a Solius family in 1915 was evicted, and a woman called Mary Barber, a Glaswegian woman, led the rent strikes, and they won, and there was sort of, there was this idea that in Glasgow, the people stood up for themselves. This is where Alex Ferguson is born into.
It's fun that he's built like the ships, and
Absolutely.
the people who built the ships are like Fergie as well. It's and if you want a reference point, go watch On the Waterfront.
Yes.
I mean, I know that's Hoboken, but it's the same world.
These are tough
Yeah.
areas and tough people. I mean, not the modern context of rough, and this is not rough. This is tough. It's a different kind of thing. There was no welfare state. You died if you didn't work.
Yeah.
The disease was prevalent. Big families. It was the Catholic area, the Gorbals. Horrendous rates of life expectancy. Govan his area, which was a big Protestant area, tended to be more Protestant. These were areas where families of 12, 15, 20 people sometimes living in 2 bedrooms, all in these things called the tenements, the infamous tenements of Glasgow, where families are piled on top of one another. These are some of the toughest places to live in Europe.
And he gets born into an era when the razor gangs of Glasgow, who become infamous, of course, over the years, sort of between the wars and all that kind of stuff. So if nothing else, you've got that layer on top as well. It's pretty violent.
Yes.
With communities and religious breaking points of where the gangs all come from.
Yes.
All clashing all the time.
And he talks about this. You have to stand up for yourself.
Yes.
You can't be a shrinking violet. If you do, you're lost at sea straight away, he says. His brother famously once was bullied Martin, and he took Martin around the house and knocked the door of the family, and said, this has to stop. And they have a fight on the doorstep. He's of this world, and he has to be. There's only 2 of them. They're quite a small family, the Fergusons, in that respect, because I think above him there's a 10, below him there's a 10, so he's kind of like seen as a smaller family. But, and this is the biggest thing, Mark, this world that he's born into, height of the Second World War, poverty, toughness. I mean, the shipyards are getting bombed because this is a big area for munitions.
Yep,
all the Singer factories turned into a munitions factory. They're building the ships there, so the Germans target it. But, and we cannot stress this enough on this podcast, this is the area of the world, mind, absolutely obsessed with football.
Yes.
I mean, like, every record is broken there for a crowd. There are thousands and thousands of football teams. Everybody goes to the match, and Glasgow is absolutely at the epicenter of this fanaticism in the game. Fanatic, beyond religion.
And as we said before in other podcasts, of course, not simply because of Rangers and Celtic, there is a whole infrastructure of
Massive.
football in that city. It feels like the most intense cosmopolitan build-up of clubs, but it matches London, if not surpasses it in that sense.
It does. London is interesting because London has an area, your team West Ham, there are dock areas, but the intensity of Glasgow in a political sense...
It's because it's a smaller space.
Yeah, I think so.
Much smaller
space, there's a Celtic thing. It's only matched possibly in the South Wales valleys in the mines for that kind of political intensity. And that's born out of the fact that it's like death-defying work. Liverpool has it, but Liverpool is very Irish influenced because of the connection to Dublin. But Newcastle, for argument's sake, is a very football-loving city, can be a political city. Nothing compared to Glasgow.
No.
Glasgow's intensity is off the scale on football and politics.
It is. It's got that. And you having said all of that, the name of his first football team, Harmony Row.
Well, he talks about these tenements. They have these backyard courts, famously, and the walls are called dikes. They have very distinctive terminology. And he talks about everybody plays football.
Yes.
And he talks about everybody watches them playing football from a young kid. And it's pretty obvious that we'll call him Fergie through it. Sir Alex, people call him Alex. We're going to call him Fergie, right? Because these episodes, I think, are going to be called Fergie. A bit like Jaws. Fergie 1, Fergie 1,
Agreed.
2. Yeah. But because this is Star Wars in its epic story, the story of Fergie. Because he's had like so many parts of his life. He was a young boy. Then he becomes an amateur footballer. Then he becomes a professional footballer. Then he becomes a young amateur manager. Then he becomes a professional manager, part-time manager, sorry. Then he becomes a manager of bigger team. So there's this trajectory through his life, which is beyond Hollywood. And you're right, as a kid, he's playing football. He's in a city which is obsessed by football. I mean, all these great managers we talk about later, Busby, Steen, they all know him as well. He's the one that comes through that I think has a little bit of them all in him. He knows them all later in life. He looks up to them all. But as a boy, he's playing football and he goes into Harmony Row. Then he plays for a little bit in Hampden for the boys' club there. And then he famously goes to one of the most famous teams in Glasgow called the
Drum Chapel Amateurs.
Yes.
So Harmony Row Boys Club, which is the one he played for first. The reason people may be going, why do I know that name? Hey, rock fans who are listening who know that name. 1971 album by Jack Bruce.
Oh, really?
Harmony Row. Because he was something of a contemporary of Fergie, born in 1943, same area, certainly grew up round there. He played jazz bass as a schoolboy. He was in Blues Incorporated. So he's a Stafford legend as an artist. In Blues Incorporated, he plays with Ginger Baker.
Yeah.
He joins John Mayall's Blues Breakers, plays with Eric Clapton.
Yep.
So 66, 68, you get, obviously, Cream is the band that he was in. But he also, which I didn't know, he's on the Manfred Mann record Pretty Flamingo.
Is he?
He's in the band at that particular stage. So that's the same Jack Bruce. And it's the album cover, 1971, is him in Harmony Row looking out of a window with a couple of local kids.
Wow.
So it's just a photograph of literally that tiny little street around which the boys' club was built. And that's where Fergie started his football.
Well, another interesting Jack Bruce fact for you and for other people. He later was in a band called Mountain, I think they were called, and that was the theme music for, do you remember World in Action, which had Leonardo da Vinci thing, the man, the turtle. Do you remember the thing where...
DiCaprio's a versatile actor, yes.
Put this on there, actually. The music, which terrified you as a kid. Do you remember?
Yes.
That was, I believe, Jack Bruce's band.
Prog rock sort of jazz thing.
Yeah.
I went to see, I made, the kids went as well. Everyone was little. We slept in the car. They remember it fondly. I saw him playing at
Talking about poverty, folks.
It's a festival, John. Of course we slept in the car. But we stayed overnight.
Just put the coat on, you kid. You're all right, just keep warm.
But they remember it fondly, not only because we made them sleep in the car, but also because I took them to the Bracknell Jazz Festival, where Jack Bruce was playing with Kit Hammerhand's band.
There you go.
Yeah.
I bet they thanked you for that.
I hope when they're listening to this bit at the moment and all the colours draining out of them with the memory. But yes, Drum Chapel Amateurs.
Very famous.
Everybody, do you know, like Wall's End Boys and Senrab in East London?
Yes.
In terms of turning out famous footballers.
D-side schools in Wales, very similar. Northeast sort of area. Very, very similar. And he goes to Drum Chapel Amateurs. And we're already halfway through, Mark, so we've got to wrap this up quickly. But he goes there, and there's a few things about Fergie that we need to sort of point out here. He's good at school, right? He goes along. This era, we have to really remember this, very different to our era. You had to be exceptional and stick out to go on to anything other than sort of, being pushed into industrial work. He has that ability. Busby, very similar. Seen as a kid that could be a school teacher, really rare. Doesn't matter, goes underground.
Right.
Fergie goes to become a toolmaker, apprentice toolmaker in the shipyards. His father and his uncle, his brother, they all work in the shipyards. Everybody works in the shipyards in Glasgow at this point. But he is absolutely obsessed with football.
Yeah.
So his schooling kind of takes a second, even though he's bright, second place. Football becomes his life. But at this point, he goes in and he becomes a toolmaker because at this point, he hasn't been taken on by a professional club.
So he's getting himself a trade because he's not stupid in both senses.
In both senses of the word.
Of the
so
word,
at this point, Alex Ferguson, I think this is a part, we'll come back to this all, so sets in a burning ambition to become a professional in something, to become full-time. All his life, this has stayed with him because at this point, he's only good enough to go into the shipyards and become a part-time footballer.
The times will change. I've got a good question. Just to rattle off some names. David Moyes, Andy Gray, Archie Gemmell, John Walk, Asa Hartford, Eddie McCready, your mate, John Robertson, all Drumchapel Amateurs Old Boys.
There you go.
Which is an amazing turnout. Here, can I ask a question for you?
Go on.
We can answer in the second half. Why did Fergie play his first football for his first team on Mars?
So, Mark, you posed a question.
I did.
Can you repeat it, please?
And it's quite the graphic one as well, isn't it? Why did Alex Ferguson play his first football on Mars?
I don't know, Mark. Why did Alex Ferguson first play his football on Mars?
Right, hold on, I'm going to take a run up at this.
Go on.
I'm very excited. Because the team he played for's nickname were the Spiders.
Oh, I know who these are. Oh! So there's a bit of background here. So
yes.
Merthyr Town, or Merthyr Tydfil as they were then, second mention.
And
apologies.
The first mention was you saying you hadn't mentioned it, which does which
Look at
counts
Johnny
as a
Fives, our
mention.
producer, guffawed in the corner.
Of course he is, because he knows you've snuck Merthyr in again, having said that you weren't going to sneak Merthyr in.
But there's a reason. Can I explain?
No, I'm sure you can.
So Merthyr Tydfil, as it were, had a fanzine called Dial M for Merthyr, the brilliantly titled,
Superb.
very
That is
famous.
as good as it gets.
And Queen's Park had one called the Spider's Web.
Nice.
And they became very close in the late 80s, and they arranged alternate games every year between the fans of both clubs. I was one of the fans who went to Glasgow in 1989.
Wow.
They came down, and we've done it every year practically since. So Merthyr have strong links to Queen's Park. They come and watch us. We go and watch them. And just last weekend, the lad I stayed with, Kevin Dizzy Devine, he was over from New York, and he's still my friend now.
No.
Yes, he is. So Queen's Park, I have been to see many, many times. And
I really wish I'd mentioned them now.
Here's an extra Fergie thing. It's his first team, right, as an amateur.
It is indeed.
They are famously the most amateur team in Scotland, only until recently.
Up until recently, the first association football team as organised in Scotland as well.
Yeah.
And they also played in the FA Cup.
They did. We should do an episode on Queen's Park because
exactly.
they've won everything. Their first team was played as Scotland against England in the first international. This team absolutely, history drips off them, and we can do an whole episode on them. But where's the Fergie connection?
Well, it's
his first team, right?
Yeah, and I was just to say the Spiders.
16.
The nice bit with Merthyr as well is they're called the Spiders because the old kits are unbelievably cool.
Yeah,
black and white hoops.
That's right.
But really tight, thin black and white.
Like
hoops.
a web, Mark.
You'd wear it today.
You would.
You'd wear that top today. It's a beautiful thing. Hence the Spiders.
Well, talking about the kit, so what happened was Fergie, this is another thing about him we can keep coming back to, never forgets his roots.
No.
It's his first team, it's 15, 16. He plays for them. And when they relaunched the kit about 10, 15 years ago, he went back there and helped them launch this kit.
Oh, did he?
Because he's probably the most famous, one of the most famous, if not the most famous ex-player, certainly. So he's never forgotten the fact that he started at Queen's Park. But this is the key. Because they were amateur, he was able to do his apprenticeship at the shipyards, apprenticeship toolmaker, and he quickly becomes the union rep. Of course he does. And there's a strike.
He's the manager of the toolmakers. Yeah. He's the gaffer.
There's a toolmaker strike, which is brilliant. Yeah, and he leads it. So this is already this boy in his teens has a real sense of who he is, his awareness, his
so
people.
You can down your toolmaker's tools.
As an apprentice. I like the
Wow.
fact he didn't even wait to become
No.
full-time. No. I'm going to become a...
Don't worry, I get it. I've been here 10 minutes. I completely and utterly understand what's going on here. We're out.
But what happens with Fergie is at this time, he's in his teens, he thinks Queen's Park, he's getting in the team, but not quite regularly, and he thinks he's got to play regular football. So he's still, enough thinking about the game. And he gets picked up by St Johnstone, who were a team based in Perth, which is quite a distance north of Glasgow. I think about 60, 70 miles. So he has to travel twice a week in training as a young boy. And he talks about this. He used to have to get 2 trains, and he was dropped off, and he used to get in at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and go to work. And what happened was, he's there one day and he's late and he's yawning in work. And one of the other union reps goes to him, "What's the matter with you, son?" And he says, "Well, I go to play for St Johnstone." And this union rep says, "Well, that's ridiculous. They're gonna kill you doing this." So he has a word with the Scottish FA, this union rep, and goes, "This kid is going up to play. He's only a teenager. He's doing his apprenticeship and because he complains, the manager makes him train on his own and stops picking him." Yeah, because he's seen as a bit of a troublemaker. I know, it's horrendous.
Because he's putting zero effort into getting there, isn't he? Good Lord.
Then check this out. He plays in a game. So he finally gets picked. And he's playing, and he talks about this all his career. I mean, he got sent off about 10 times, but obviously these are very different times. He's a very, very sort of spiky forward in those days where you could...
Do you know what? Just on that surprised. I don't know why, but it surprised me when I saw that he was a centre forward.
Yeah.
There's something about him that implies battling midfielder or aggressive fullback, but no, number 9.
Loved to score a goal. I mean, like sinewy and light, sensational looking fella when he was younger. Fergie, but he's still a handsome man now. But then, I mean, look like a film star. You see young photographs, incredible looking bloke, played up front, sinewy, aggression, govern. And he's playing this game as a teenager, poor lad. And the centre half smashes him so badly, he breaks his cheekbone.
No.
Completely sort of smashes his face up. So at this point, he's kind of starting to, not falling out in love with the game, but he's going, "Look, I've got to travel the other side of Scotland."
Exactly.
I'm finding it difficult. And he starts to go out in town. And it's a really poignant story, and I've read about it and spoken about it, and he speaks about it brilliantly. He falls out with his beloved father, who's also called Alexander. He's got his younger brother, Martin, who's also a good footballer, by the way, and has a good professional career. And he brings in later, we'll talk about it, uses him as his international scout. He played for Partick Thistle. His brother actually played for Barnsley, Martin. Anyway, he falls out with his father, his beloved father, and they live in the same house for 6 months, and they don't speak. Fergie goes off. And it's because Fergie's going into town, the dancing, they called it in Glasgow.
Yes.
So he's sort of like, he's finding it, I like saying he's a great looking guy. He likes going into town. Glasgow's booming. It's all, it's all the dance halls. Barrowlands, Locarno, all these really famous places in Glasgow. And he's cut at a moment. And check this out, Mark. I found this out and I was like, I can't believe people haven't made more of this. He applies to go to Canada. He's like, "I'm done. I want to move to Canada. I'm just going to finish my apprenticeship."
Talk about your fork in the road. Sliding door.
So he applies to go to Canada, right? So he's gone. It's all going to be accepted. He's sent off to London. He's done. Him and his dad are not talking. St Johnstone are not picking him. He's had this horrendous smash in the face. He's recovering. He's starting to get interested in more other stuff. And he gets picked in a cup game to play Rangers, his beloved Rangers as a boy.
Well, that's Canada's off.
And he rings up to go, "I'm not doing it. I'm not playing." And he tells his mother, and his mother, because his father's not talking to him, gives him a dressing down.
No.
Yeah, she goes, "This is a chance to play your hometown club. What are you thinking?" And he said, "I'm really ashamed." So he rings the club back up and goes, "Look, I am really got flu. I'm all right. I can play." And fair play to the manager. He picks him. And I think this is the moment in Fergie's life, ultimately. And I keep coming back to it. He plays in the game. They win 3-2, and he becomes the first away player ever to score a hat-trick against Rangers. And he's in all the newspapers the next morning. There's photographs of him holding up the newspaper.
Without that change of mind. I mean, weirdly enough, the only downside is Canada would have won the World Cup in 1986 because if they'd gone out there, they'd end up managing them and they'd have lifted the trophy. But,
he probably would have done better than he did in 86 for Scotland.
So sorry about that. Exactly, yeah.
They didn't have a good time
Canada.
there. But he plays this game, and this is a life-changing moment for Fergie.
As you can imagine, you've got to be thinking fate has decided my future.
So suddenly, he's in all the news. They're looking at this kid. He plays... He has a sensational game. He scores a hat-trick, and Dunfermline come in for him. So this burning ambition to become a professional footballer, he finally becomes. So now he just Mrs. Steen, by the way, arrives the season after Steen leaves.
Of course.
So Steen is there, and Steen's done this miraculous job. He's gone to Hibs, and then he goes to Celtic famously and becomes arguably one of the greatest managers ever. Fergie just misses him, but he knows him, and he even calls him Mr. Steen.
And indeed, as we'll discover talking more about this, Jock Steen plays an integral, crucial part in Fergie's development as a manager as well.
So which we will tell that story.
To that later, yeah.
So he goes to Dunfermline, and he's not, listen, he's not letting this chance go. He becomes like one of the top goal scorers in the division over the next 2 years. He scores 51 goals and 45 goals, in 51 games. He's the top goal scorer in Scotland, or joint top goal scorer in Scotland. He has his moments. I think with Fergie, there's always these things where there's so much adversity. There's so many. It's such a great lesson to anybody listening to this of all ages and anywhere in life. There's so many setbacks and knockbacks, which you think, God, anybody else would get, but he just comes through them. So he's like dropped for this Scottish Cup final for Dunfermline, even though he's one of their best strikers, and they didn't win the league by 1 point. But he keeps coming back.
Yeah,
he keeps using it as like a fuel, I think, to sort of like propel him. He's like a rocket. He's just like every time something damage him, he goes faster. It's like dropping the bit of that thing, and the ship goes.
Yeah,
it's like he's never ever not doing that.
And as you say, the whole thing is, it makes him stronger.
It does.
He becomes this. But the guy that we know, the Ferguson that everybody knows, is made up of all of these Fergusons that are being built during all of this part of his life.
And everything you learn in life, and they talk to you about like what's built in adversity. He's the living embodiment.
Isn't he, though?
He just is, because he's had nothing easy, nothing on a plate from the very start. And he goes to Dunfermline, and he's seen as this sort of like certainly one of the best strikers in Scotland at this point. And he's finally signed for his beloved Rangers the £65,000, a Scottish record between the two Scottish teams, and he's there. He's kind of like, him and his father have made up after the 3-2 game.
Useful.
There's a beautiful story when he comes home that night. He's just done the hat trick for St Johnstone against Scotland. He comes in that night and he walks to the door. It's a beautiful story, and his mother goes, "Go and see your dad." And he goes, "Okay," and he walks in and he starts talking to his father. And he said, "I'm so glad she did that." And they would think, so his father becomes again, this is an important dynamic, his father's relationship, because something happens there later on, which again fuels him even more.
Yep.
So he goes to Rangers. And he's delighted at this point. But again, doesn't have it all his own way in Rangers. In fact, it ends at some point in like sort of 1969 with a Scottish Cup final where he's blamed for losing Billy McNeil in a corner, and they don't win the game. And he's pilloried in the press. So when he goes there, but he said something really interesting, Mark, again. He said, "I didn't have a great time in Rangers, even though they're my dream club to play for. I was blamed for this goal." He was asked about his wife, because he's married his wife, Kathy, at the dancing, right? So she becomes a big part of his life. He meets her, I believe, in the Locarno at the dancing. And there's a great story where somebody said to him, "And how did he meet her?" And he goes, "Well, she couldn't resist me, could she?" He said, "Well, look what I look like." And he's like, right. Do you know, he's just like young, lithe, brilliant Scottish footballer. And he meets Kathy, who becomes a bit of like his rock for the rest of his life, and they're solid together. But she's Catholic. And Fergie's interesting because Fergie's father was Protestant and his mother was Catholic, but it was decided to bring them up as Protestants. Do you know why he said? Because my life chances would have been better. So it's like,
that's a fair point.
Certainly, at that time,
arguably where they're living would obviously be
absolutely
that, but also because, as you say, at that point in time in Glasgow and well before, Protestants were assumed to get the best jobs.
They did.
And the jobs.
They did. It was just a fact.
Then the Catholics would simply...
Well, they were living in the Gorbals.
Were stealing jobs.
Which is a tough... I can talk about poverty again. The Gorbals was, horrendous, really, what people had to live through, and they were sort of excluded from places like education. They were places the civil service, the police. Very difficult for a Catholic in Scotland at that point to get thing.
Well, there was uproar when the Education Act came in to protect Catholic schools and bring them in as part of the system. Wasn't
my father was a Catholic. My mother was sort of a different faith. So my father had that thing with the Irish ancestry, and it wasn't such a thing in Wales. But when I was born, they decided it was a Catholic school. They were like, we don't really want to send him to a Catholic school. We'd rather send him to a secular school. And this is within my lifetime.
Yeah.
So in those days, his
this
father,
is not as old fashioned as you think.
We were just talking. This all sounds a bit Dickensian. And we were just saying to the producer, he was going, and this is a manager we all remember. This is his life. Catholic meant something. Being Protestant meant something. And he marries Kathy, who was a Catholic. And of course, Rangers is such a Protestant club. Still isn't to an extent, but Catholics have played for it since. Obviously, Graham Souness famously signed Mo Johnston, and later Ray Wilkins, and all these people were Catholics who played for him. But at this point, Protestant is a solidly Rangers, sorry, is a solidly Protestant club. And he's asked by a director, and it's one of his great laments. He says, "Where did you marry your wife, Alec?" And he goes, "Oh, in a registry office." And he goes, "Good." And he said, "I wish I'd told him to F off."
Yeah.
As if to say, what's that to do with
because
you?
he's having almost making an excuse for himself.
Absolutely.
And indeed, what an offensive question in the first
What
place.
an offensive question. So we talked about this with the Jock Stein thing. Because Jock Stein was born a Protestant and meant to manage a Catholic club, Celtic, even though he won 9 titles, when he didn't win it on the 10th, there was always a feeling in the club that, he's not one of us. And Jock felt that. And Fergie here has this feeling, because he's married a Catholic, that he's not quite the 100% Rangers man he should be.
And it's got a rankle particularly because, as you say, he's playing for the team that he grew up with
adores
and loved.
them. Still does. We talked about it earlier on, he still goes.
So he's not let that punish him in terms of being a fan of the club, has he?
And somebody asked him once, he said, "Do you regret, ever going to Rangers?" And what an answer for somebody. He goes, "No." He said, "You know why? I understood what it means to be and what the expectation is of a truly big club."
This is.
So he's gone. So when he later goes to Manchester United, which we'll talk about, he knows that when you're at a club where you expect to win every single football match, and they still do.
Yes.
You expect to win every single football match. That brings a different kind of pressure.
So
and he said, "I learned that."
He's put that in his back pocket as well for later, hasn't he?
Absolutely.
How was his international
So
career?
it's a bizarre thing in Scotland where he played for them on a tour, but they were never allowed to they weren't given an official cap because it wasn't a home nations game. So they were only capped if he played for Scotland in a home nations game in Britain. So he played with them on a tour. But fair play to the Scottish FA. I mean, obviously very antiquated at that time, and the past a different country. They do things differently there. They changed this, I think about 15, 20 years ago, where they changed the law and they give all these old players caps who had... There was one player, Umlach, wasn't it, who played in the 58... he died without ever having a proper cap. He played every World Cup game because he didn't play in all nations. Imagine this now.
All right.
Didn't give him a cap.
Yeah, well, he's playing the second-class competition.
He plays in the 58 World Cup.
Nuts.
And his son started the campaign.
Yeah, quite
rightly. But Fergie was one of the beneficiaries of that because he finally got his Scottish Cup because he played for Scotland, but he was on a tour. And he was very proud to get it. So it's kind of like there's these odd rules where you've got to people. Was that really how it was? You go, yeah. These are the rules.
As we discover podcast after podcast,
yes,
Scotland had its own way of going about its football
they
world.
Are so. I always say this, and the Scots, you're wonderful. You write into us and you message me. They are so important to the history of football, Scotland.
Yeah.
They are so important. They have the same place that Wales kind of has in rugby in that sense.
Agreed.
They were so good. My father, I'll leave this because we got to wrap this up.
We've got to his playing career.
We went to Falkirk.
Yes.
And he's at Falkirk, and he's kind of in the sort of autumn of his career, and then he's doing his coaching badges, Mark. He's up, I think it's Largs, and there's a big fuss at the time. There's these people in Scotland going, "What's this nonsense? This very continental nonsense of learning how to coach." Right? I'm not making this up. There's TV clips of it of people in the street and people in the Scottish FA. Some going, "It's ridiculous." He doesn't care. He's on his coaching badges already. This is Fergie, and he's way down the line with them, and he understands instinctively how to keep players entertained during coaching. I learned all this, and he's up there, so he's already starting to prepare, and then he goes. And he's in Falkirk, and then he finally ends up at Ayr United, and we'll kind of end it with this. And he's at Ayr United, and he's part-time, and he's got a bar. He's got a few bars in Glasgow. One is called Fergie's Bar. He gets sent off for Ayr United. He's winding down really in his career, and he's thinking, "Oh, you know what? It's not really for me." And I think at Falkirk, it was an awful thing happened where he was the coach, and then a new manager came in and replaced him as the coach. So he's kind of fallen out of love with it. But some very funny stories of when he was owning the bar. I think it was in Govan. I think it was in that area called Fergie's. He was in with the Dockers crowd, and there's stories of him buying a jacket. And his Cathy's having a go at him. He goes, "Dockers are magpies." So he said, "Stuff used to come into my thing." And he said, "I put this beautiful leather suede coat on one night." And he said, "It's beautiful. Paid," he said, "a lot of money for it, £6. Gorgeous." He said, "I'm out in the middle of town and the 2 arms fall off." And he said, "Cathy was like, that'll teach you for buying stuff that's fallen off the side of a ship."
Fell off the back of a merchant ship, exactly.
So he's got his badges. He's very 50-50. He's done that footballer's thing of buying his bar. He's happy.
Could have been it, couldn't it?
Could have been it. But something really interesting happens is that in '74, the World Cup's on, Scotland are there, And somebody sort of says to him, "Oh, there's been a few inquiries for you." The guy at United, bless him, says there's been a few inquiries about you for being a manager, and it kind of surprises him. Oh, really?
Oh, right.
So they've spotted this about him,
Yeah.
and they go to him. There's a team called East Stirlingshire, famously. I think they may play in Falkirk as well. Anyway, they're interested in having a chat to you, and we'll start now because we'll start his managerial career. But he decides to go finally. As embark on this monumental management career in East Stirlingshire, and I'll end it by saying this: he goes in to meet the chairman in the summer, and the chairman, he sits down with the chairman, he goes, "Can you give me the squad?" And he said he delays me for 2 weeks, and 2 weeks before we started the season, I realised we only had 8 players
And no goalies.
and no goalkeeper. So this is the start.
What you might call an inauspicious start to his
An
management
inauspicious
career.
start.
But guess what? And
Yeah.
this is no spoiler. It does get better for him.
It gets better because, as we'll end by saying this, all this stuff are the beautiful ingredients that are going to make Alex Ferguson probably the greatest domestic football manager ever.
Totally.